on behalf of the German-Ukrainian Cooperation in Organic Agriculture, COA. You know, this is a project which is implemented by AFC-IAK and is financed by the German Federal Ministry of Food and Agriculture. I welcome especially the staff members of the Ukrainian Ministry for Development of Economy, Trade and Agriculture and the State Service of Consumer Protection and Food Safety. And of course, all the other organic stakeholders I see here on the screen.
You see here, in 1991, the 2092 was the first of these directly applicable laws in the European Union. This remained in force until 2007, 2008. Then it was replaced by 834 from 2007, which is the basic rule. You have 889 with all the production details and 1235 from 2008 with the rules about the imports of organic goods into the European Union. Institutional and constitutional setup of the European Union was changed. And that's the reason why we get this new law. It's 848 from 2018. I have been asked about changes in the import rules, in the import from non-EU countries into the EU. And as you are aware, there was a regime of equivalence. Equivalence is distinct from conformity, from full compliance. In 2014, the EU Commission suggested to change that, to change from equivalence to compliance, which means 100%, 100% sameness of production and controls in the third country. And now, when it is about to implement the switch from the equivalency to the compliance status, it argues 2 points. First, it says, well, we don't switch to compliance with full speed. We do it step by step. And we allow countries, third countries, to negotiate with us on a bilateral basis. And when we do that on a bilateral basis, as we have done it with the United States of America, with Chile, etc., then we allow for equivalence, because then we assess the other system and we compare it with ours. And by doing that in a very detailed manner, we allow for equivalence. That's one point. And the other point is, very many observers said in 2014, that's a pretty strange system to have positive lists for fertilizers and and pesticides for the conditions in Europe. Because there you have certain needs, you have certain responses, and that's a system that has been tested. When you go now to some cultures in the tropics, you have different needs. To this, the EU Commission responded and said, well, it's true, we want to switch to compliance, but we do it in a way so that we set up a special list for those climatic conditions in non-EU countries that are clearly separate from our conditions. So the switch to compliance, it's not really full scale, it's rather a mixture. But the most important thing for you is that this argument, this point of the EU Commission, which is now reflected, of course, in the 848, that there is a possibility to negotiate equivalence on a bilateral basis, it is not really realistic. It's not realistic. Why? I will explain that. So, how long will Ukraine keep its equivalency status What does the 848 provide for this? How long can CBs that are now approved for the Ukraine continue to operate on this basis? The answer is until 2025. When you ask me, will we have a bilateral agreement, we, the Ukraine, with the EU, I say, yeah, but not before a couple of decades have passed and we don't know what happens in the meantime. So it's not realistic. This is not a particular problem for the Ukraine. It's a problem for every third country. There are only very few countries that are already on the third country list, with which the EU Commission will first negotiate, and it will take at least 10 years or 15 years or 20 years to finish these negotiations before any new negotiations will begin. The provision in the 848 concerning these transitional rules are in Article 57. It's the transitional measures relating to organic controls. And it says, the recognition of control bodies granted under 333 of 834 shall expire at the end of 2023. And now this has been replaced by the 31st December 2024. So only at the beginning of 2025, the authorizations of organic control bodies to work as equivalence control bodies in the Ukraine will expire. That's the time frame we look at now. I have been asked what are the major differences between the present system, 834, that will remain for 1 year, and what are the rules of 848? What's the major difference? And my answer to that is, for me, it's crystal clear that it's one particular aspect. It is preventive measures, an organic freeze triggered by pesticide traces, and permanent decertification when preventive measures are found lacking. In order to make you fully understand what that means, we look now step by step at 2 or 3 provisions of the 848. This is Article 28. We will look at Article 28 step by step. It requires 2 things. First, a systematic identification of critical steps, plus precautionary measures at each of this step to avoid the risk of contamination. So it is not required that you have no contamination, because that's physically not possible. Now, what does systematic identification of critical steps mean? It means that when you buy seeds, and when you buy seeds, for example, that are conventional, because there are no organic seeds available, you must at least make sure that the seeds are not treated by a fungicide, which is not permitted for organic production. So the first step would be to identify accepting the delivery of seeds, well, even ordering the seeds and being sure that what you order is without a treatment illegal under organic production conditions. And when you receive the seeds, that's another critical step, because someone should have a look at the seeds, because sometimes you order non-treated seeds and what you get is treated seeds. So there must be someone in the system who at least looks at the seeds, whether they have a color or whatever that indicates that they have been treated, and so on. In order to avoid contamination with substances that are not authorized, operators shall take the following precautionary measures. We look at that at every stage of production, preparation, and distribution. First, you must identify the risks of contamination. How do you do that? You do that by a systematic identification of critical procedural steps. This terminology of the critical procedural steps is already in the 889. My message to you is, this is the core, the most important aspect of organic certification in future. It's a systematic, step-by-step identification of critical procedural steps. In what way critical? Well, in the way critical that there are windows for the influx of contaminants that are non-authorized substances. We are talking about what comes from conventional agriculture. It doesn't really matter whether it comes from your neighbor or somewhere else. De facto, first, you need to have these critical steps analysis, a paper that does that step by step. And the next part of this paper is, this is B, that you identify measures that are proportionate and appropriate to avoid the risk of contamination. Where? Well, at the critical procedural steps. So defining the critical procedural steps is the one thing, and it's followed by defining the measures that are to be taken. And when you take measures, of course, it's not sufficient to have it as a general plan. You need to have documentation that these measures are indeed implemented for each particular lot, for shipload or whatever, what you have. And now we have Article 29, which is of utmost importance in practice. It says, whenever a trace of an unauthorized substance is established by an organic control body as being present in an organic food product, qualitatively, not the quantity, an official investigation is triggered. Now that's a pretty rigorous system, because when you have the rule that whenever you have the slightest trace, a qualitative trace of a pesticide, and it triggers a stop of using the product as organic, that's new, and that's really something. It's a completely different game. So again, Article 29, you have a trace of a pesticides from conventional agriculture, for example. It triggers an official investigation, that's Article 29, subchapter 1, letter A, and combined with this official investigation, you always have the provisional prohibition. So the control body shall provisionally prohibit both the placing on the market of the product concerned as organic and their use in organic production pending the results of the investigation referred to in point 1. And now that's the important point. The question is, how long does this official investigation pend? How long does it continue? When does it stop? And there I have suggestions. So, what happens when the proportionate and appropriate precautionary measures are found missing as a result of this investigation? We have seen Article 28 requires these proportionate and appropriate precautionary measures. The answer is, at that point in time, just the fact that they are missing, the preliminary freeze becomes permanent decertification. Well, of course, when there was active application by the organic farmer in the organic field, of course you have decertification. That's the way now as it is. But now you also have a permanent decertification when these precautionary measures are found missing. And also when an instruction of the control body concerning these measures has been ignored. Where does that come from? It comes from Article 29, subchapter 2. And now, for all practical purposes, when you look at that from the viewpoint of a trader, of a buyer, an importer in the EU, what will they ask for? Well, they will ask for a proof for preventive measures. Well, you buy the goods, but also you buy the proof of the preventive measures with the goods, possibly by buying an instant access to the critical points analysis and corresponding preventive measures all the way back to the farm. When you look at all this from the viewpoint of the organic operators in the system, they need to require those who deliver goods to be prepared well in advance. And this must be paid for. This must be organized beforehand. And it's a new game because that's really new. It has not been there before. A part of what you could do in the implementation of organic controls in the Ukraine is to provide for a framework how to do the critical points analysis, how to identify the appropriateness and proportionality of measures, and how to document the measures as they are implemented. And what is the EU expecting from the Ukrainian authorities in this regard? Well, I think it's just what we discussed. It's helping to close the official investigation triggered by a trace report. So the idea in the EU Commission, for example, by Nicolas Verlet, was that when this is all well prepared, it does not disrupt trade. I say to that, yeah, I understand the argument. I doubt that it will really work, but we will need to do that. We will need to work on that. We look at organic seeds. What will happen when the 848 becomes applicable? Now we have the non-availability of organic seeds, and that allows for the use of conventional seeds, however not treated. Will these exceptions continue? Yes, they will continue. Will the organic seeds have to be 100% organic at this point? No, but there is a need for an information system so that there is proof for a mechanism that allows those who offer organic seeds to do it in a way which does not trigger costs to them. That's very important, at least for the EU side. The member states must install information systems, databases accessible online via the internet. And for those who offer organic seeds, this offer must be free. So I answer, yeah, I think there is a need for an information system adapted to the local possibilities and the local practices. And it will continue as it is. So there will be a mechanism to use conventional seed when you don't have organic seeds available. And I warn here, it's easy to say organic seeds are available, but they must be really available. The quality must be reasonable. It must be the right kind. And it does not work with all cultures. It makes a big difference whether you have hybrids or whether you can grow your seeds, soya or something. But still, I think it's necessary to have an eye on the market realities at each point in time with each culture specifically. What role does national legislation as the organic law of the Ukraine play for future control and certification according to the EU regulation? How can the national legislation support export into the EU, providing for a seed register? Yeah, well, of course, that's right. Seed register is one possibility, or plus documentation of preventive measures with a critical point analysis and the instant availability of proofs for that and the implementation of measures. As I showed, this is not really a legal requirement in the sense that in order to operate organic controls in the Ukraine, you need to have that. But when you don't have it, you have a constant interruption of the flow of organic produce from the Ukraine into the EU, just de facto by the mere fact that there are lots of traces detected, and by the mere fact that even when you test the produce in the export harbor and it shows nothing, you can practically be sure that somehow something will show up in the further course of this product.